that introduction is basically half my talks. But I guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk a little bit about street medics, what we did during the G20, talk a bit about what we saw, some of the lessons that we learned, and where we are at today as a community. I'm really happy to answer questions at the end of the panel. So Toronto Street Medics was a group that began in the 1990s. It began as one person who brought a first aid pack to some of the OCAP demos, and it organically grew into a network of people who coordinated to provide care at various demonstrations. Such manifestations included Shut Down Bay Street, the Queen's Park Riot of 2001, and also provided support to Quebec Action Medicale at for Ottawa for the FDA gathering in 2006. And as the days of the big anti-mobilization mobilizations kind of petered out, so did the need for street medics. And so the Toronto Street Medics kind of went into hibernation. Then the G20 decided to occupy Toronto. And so the main mobilization network, which Brian just talked about, the Toronto Community Mobilization Network, approached myself and asked if I knew any kind of medical providers that would be interested in organizing street medics. I said sure, and we got about 5 to 10 main coordinators who worked starting in probably February to start organizing supplies, organizing a space that we could host the supplies, and various action medics for the days of. For the actual days of the summit, we had medics from out of town. People came from Guelph, from Montreal, from Victoria, Halifax, Guelph, and the city. And yeah, we had a lot of more RSVPs from people that were planning on coming up from the state, but because of intense border fascism and the like, so many people didn't make it across, but a lot of those people provided really invaluable support and assistance in the planning. Was there anybody at the demonstrations who needed a medic anytime? Or met any of the medics?
My friend was a nurse, he was a medic.
Yeah.
And he had a really interesting story. He was really shaken up when he came back. I had to give him brief counseling. It was very great. I'm connected with the work that he did.
I guess one part of the medics too that we did set up was a peer-to-peer support line, and that included people who were trained in providing assistance for sexual assault survivors, and also people just providing counseling for people who were affected by a lot of the trauma that happened, both emotional and psychological and physical. So why are there medics at these kind of demonstrations? Of course, we know that these kind of situations cause emotional and psychological trauma. We're looking for things like dehydration, heat stroke, diabetic emergencies, disorientation. There's interesting kind of crowd dynamics. Often, sometimes the jobs of medics is just to say, like, walk, don't run, kind of those kind of things, get people to slow down in those intense kind of situations. Also, often you can be in the most hospital, densely populated city in the world, such as Toronto, where you have 5 hospitals on that core of university. For anybody that remembers, there's Toronto General Hospital, Western Hospital is in that area, Mount Sinai. But even if you're in that situation, EMS will not dispatch any kind of a medical services because it's considered a riot zone or a red zone. And so that's why action medics are often needed. As we saw in 2001 at the Queen's Park Riot, we had a really intense head trauma where there was a compound skull fracture. The person was quite disoriented. There was, even though they were in that center, there was no availability of emergency medical services, and so medics were needed to transport, stabilize that person and bring them to emergency medical services. And so this kind of brings me to a meeting that I had, part of the prep for this, for responding to, or for planning the services, was that I did have a meeting with one of the coordinators for emergency medical services for the integrated security unit. named Peter Toro. We had a meeting in April, and I guess I'm just talking a little bit about this meeting because I think it's kind of allegorical in many different ways. So I asked to meet with him because, as we saw in the Queen's Park riot, sometimes there is that need to have medical services for people who are really hurt. The problem is that when you're calling 911, they won't dispatch, like I said, and so they won't respond to a call, and then you're starting to flood the lines, which are typically used for civilians. It's irresponsible use of resources, etc. So the plan was to try to meet with the integrated security unit, who has these G20 tactical units, which are used to respond for police services only, but we thought that perhaps in this kind of situation, they may designate some of their ambulances or medical services to people who have been injured in a protest and are in the red zone. I asked to meet with him privately. He indicated that I would not be able to meet with him privately, that if I met with him, I would be meeting with him in the presence of also a member of Toronto Police Services, Toronto Fire, because they're an integrated unit. And so initially I declined, but we talked it over and I said, okay, I'd meet with them. Unfortunately, the meeting went quite like we anticipated. We didn't really get even the chance to discuss the use of this line or the creation of this line. What ended up happening was that Inspector Needles, who's the member of the Toronto Police Services, he wanted to ask, he only used the opportunity to pretty much interrogate me about my professional qualifications as a nurse, my political affiliations, etc., etc. And what came out of this meeting was actually this kind of strange offer where he said that if I can guarantee that our medics are all politically neutral, then we can also be guaranteed a certain level of political and police immunity. Of course, this is disturbing on a number of levels. The first is that they're obviously planning something that somebody would want immunity from. So, I mean, that kind of gives you a tip. Not that we had any doubt that that was going to be happening, but it's just kind of weird to hear it right from the horse's mouth or pig's mouth or whatever. So that's disturbing. And then so is the whole idea of political neutrality in general, because you have to start to ask, what is political neutrality? The only way that I could answer to this sort of ultimatum was like, are you politically neutral? And of course they have to say, no, we're not politically neutral, even though they would claim that they're politically neutral. The cops are not politically neutral. And what was disgusting about the whole G20 situation was that the Toronto police sold themselves and sold their organization as a politically neutral organization that was there to protect the public. And I think the most interesting part of being part of the street medics was that we know that the police were not there to protect the public. They were there to do anything except for to protect the public. We saw so much police violence, so many traumatizing incidents, so many injuries against public, whether they were protesters who were or people who were politically neutral that were just on the side streets going for a walk, standing by the protests. We saw really horrific injuries take place. And so this idea of political neutrality really is a disturbing kind of notion. And of course I said, no, I can't guarantee that anyone's politically neutral. And in fact, I think the majority of us are anarchists, so that's probably not going to work out. And so then so it kind of degenerated from there, unfortunately. There's the word anarchist. They kind of put their backs up. And so then Inspector Needles just started talking about his weapons that he had, such as tear gas, and he started saying, you know what we have? We have these bean bags, we have this LRAD, we have this kind of going like this. I was like, and you're going to get that back. And any of your projectiles, you can expect to get those right back. And then he kind of asked me to leave, and then I left. And then we kept on going with our organizing. We kept planning, and we decided never to have another meeting with the integrated security unit again, because it was a big waste of time, and I hate traveling out there. So then this whole idea, again, of the political neutrality, I think just is really bizarre, because like I was saying, the police are anything except for politically neutral. A lot of those weapons that he was listing came from funding derived directly from the security budget, which we know is $1.3 billion. How can you claim to be neutral when so much of your budget is coming? You have a serious investment in protecting the G20 when a giant proportion of your budget is coming, and that budget we're seeing, that was not only for the G20, that's not just for 3 days of protests, that is going to be used over the next years in order to continue doing the same kind of repression we're seeing in our communities day in and day out. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and I guess to just go a little bit more on that tangent, is that especially right now with the decisions that were made in Toronto about the age of austerity and the austerity measures that are being implemented, which means cut to the special diet, which means increasing border enforcement, which means increased police in our communities and a greater opportunity for criminalization. They're expecting increased protests, and they're expecting the increased militancy of our protests, which we're going to bring. But it also means that we are going to, that they need that money, and they use the G20 as an excuse in order to create the opportunity to receive that and to have those weapons in cash. So what else did we do other than piss off the cops? We organized an info session and training for medics. We researched police weapons and the potential health effects, and we coordinated supplies in order to mitigate those the danger of those weapons. We set up a wiki and a listserv for sharing information and updates. We advertised that medics would be present for all demonstrations, and we assigned point people to connect with the various groups that Farah talked about in order to provide medic services and also for the planning of logistics. And it sounds cliche, but what Farah was saying is incredibly true, that fear was the greatest weapon that they used. That kind of campaign that they launched in the weeks previous to the demonstrations was so effective. It was effective, but it wasn't. Because, like she said, we pulled people back in. We let them know that medics would be there to mitigate any of the dangers that they felt were coming from the LRAD. We told them that the LRAD we gave people information and helped them know that they're strong enough to defend themselves, and that in a community and with solidarity we can defend each other and be strong with each other. And I think that combined with the legal services, people knew that if they were in any kind of legal trouble, that the Movement Defense Committee would be there in order to assist them. That really greatly helped to bring people onto the streets and feel safe in their expression of their healthy dissent of the system of repression. And I think that those were very powerful tools in the organizing, having medics and a lot of people present. So the TCM kind of inspired people to get on the streets, and we helped to mitigate some of the fear. We also set up the first aid tent at the June 25th tent city, provided water and medical care to demonstrators and community members during the days of resistance, and we coordinated medical attention to release detainees at the detention facility. I'm going to give a brief run over of the few days of action. Okay. So I guess what I'm going to say maybe is just, I'll skip all the rest of it, because you guys were probably there, you already know about all the messed up stuff that happened. What a lot of people did not see was the complete incompetence post G20. We saw people being released from court without medications, without health cards, without money to buy their medications. We saw people released without having had psychiatric medications for 3 or 4 days in the institution. a lot of what medics did post G20 was coordinate that kind of care. We got people medications, we provided counseling, we provided direct health care at that point. And we continue to follow up with people to this day that were treated there. And I'm going to leave the rest of it for questions. Thank you so much.